Hi, my name is Kim J and I'm a volunteer for RNIB. I'm also a visually impaired chef. I've written a cookery book called A Taste of Spice, which is Indian cuisine, with all proceeds going to RNIB, and it's in large print, which is easier for visually impaired people to read. Now today I'm going to make bread, but I'm going to make flatbread, which is going to be stuffed with cheese and pepperoni. Now the ingredients you're going to need for the basic bread recipe is flour, 600 grams of flour. You're going to need 70 grams of dried yeast, a tablespoon of sugar and a teaspoon of salt. Now those are your basic bread ingredients. Now for the stuffed bread, now you can use different ingredients if you want, but what I'm going to use is cheese. Approximately 100 grams of cheddar cheese, approximately 50 grams of mozzarella. I'm going to use fennel. I'm also going to use about a quarter of an onion, which I'm going to chop, about 30 grams of olives, which I'm going to slice, pepperoni, and for me, green chilies. But again, this is your dish, this is your recipe, so you can use any ingredients you want. And those are the ingredients I'm going to use today to make the flatbread. I don't have a bread oven. I wish I had. So if anyone out there wants to give me one, I'd love one. So what I do is, even before I start kneading the bread, is I put the oven on. And I put the oven on to maximum. And what this does, it heats the kitchen and keeps it warm, allowing the dough to rise. Now, what I've got on my oven are these tactile markings, and they help me to find exactly what temperature to put the oven on. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to weigh the flour. Right, now I'm going to need 600 grams of strong flour or bread flour. Now you'll notice I'm using a weighing kitchen scales that talks. Absolutely brilliant. You can get this from RNIB or any other retail. You know, there are a lot of them that are now selling the talking weighing scales. So we're going to weigh out the flour, 600 grams. Now you need to sieve it. Now this allows air to get into that flour, as well as getting rid of any little bits of roughage that are in there. I've measured the flour out. Now I'm going to activate the yeast. Now the yeast it's a living organism, and dried yeast and normal yeast, it's almost as if it's in static slumber. So what we need to do is waken it up. Now in order to do that, I am going to add a tablespoon of sugar. Sugar and yeast, when put together, literally it just wakens up and it feeds the yeast. And into that you want a little bit of water, not a lot, just a little. It's got to be warm or hot water. Stir the yeast. And you leave it for at least 4 minutes. And in that time, that yeast will waken up and it'll be ready to do its work into putting all that air into your dough. And what I'm now going to do is I'm going to put a teaspoon of salt into the flour. I'm now going to put the yeast that we've fermented again into the flour. I'm going to, with warm to hot water, make sure it's warm to hot, because dough, especially bread dough, loves the heat. And I'm going to start mixing this flour, water and the yeast until it's a lovely dough. Now this, for me, is always the best bit of making bread. It is so tactile, you get your hands in there, and like children, I like to get my hands messy. And like children, I like to I get the ingredients everywhere but where it should be, but it is fun. And that's the whole thing about cooking and baking. It's a fun element. If you do it and you think, oh, it's a chore, you don't want to do it. But if you actually sit there and think of it as a child would, that it's fun. It's fun getting your hands in there and getting your hands messy. And it's absolutely amazing to see simple ingredients turn into amazing food. Now, the dough needs to be soft. You just add a little bit of water at a time until you get it to that lovely soft stage. You don't need to put too much water in, just enough so that the flour comes together and it literally starts. It's almost as if the dough is cleaning the bowl. Now, on a lightly floured surface, you put the dough and you start kneading. Now, the best way to knead is you stretch the dough so it's almost flat on your floured surface. Add a tiny bit more flour, not a lot, and you start rolling it in using the heel of your hand to do it. And as you roll it in, you're rolling in the air and you're stretching the gluten in the flour, and you roll, and you almost sort of, as you're rolling, the dough turns into like a sausage shape. Once it's a sausage shape, turn it lengthwise. If it's a little bit sticky, put a little flour, not too much, and again with the heel of your hand start stretching it and rolling it back on itself until once again it's a sausage shape. Now, lots of people have different methods of kneading. This is mine. Now, unfortunately, I have quite a bit of weakness down one side of my body, so doing something like this for me is difficult. So luckily I have a mixer which my children, fabulous they are, bought for me one birthday so that I could do something that I used to do and I love the most, which is knead bread. I'm going to put this dough into the mixer. Now, if you don't have a mixer, don't worry, keep on kneading like that, and you knead for at least 5 to 10 minutes until that dough is soft and smooth. I'm going to put the dough into my machine. Now, it has a special dough hook. For those of you who have normal food processors, look at the attachments. It may have a dough hook, and now I'm going to start kneading with this. Now, the great thing about the age that we're living in, there are a lot of appliances out there that, if you have any kind of impairment, helps you. For instance, the talking kitchen scales. And for me that has a weakness in my hand, these machines, and they're worth getting if you can. If not, like I said, just knead it normally. I've took the dough out of my food mixer, and for those of you who are kneading it by hand, the dough now, the outside bit feels really smooth and elastic. And as you sort of slightly knead it on the pastry board, you can almost hear the squelch of the air that's going into that dough. And you can feel the pockets of air in the dough. And you don't need the flour to kind of do the kneading anymore. It's almost as if it's coming away from the pastry board, almost clean. And that is perfect dough. Now, when my kids were little, we used to play a tag team when we did bread. So, and that was before I had the machine. So I would knead for a few minutes, and then one of my other kids would jump in and they would knead for a few minutes. And that way it's easier on the arms for those of you who, like me, struggle. Now, it's come together, it's soft, it's stretchy, it's smooth. So I roll it up into a bowl like that and I put it into a mixing bowl. Now I like to use metal or glass mixing bowls when I prove my bread, and the reason for that is they're good conductors of heat. But if you don't have them and you have only plastic ones, that's fine. So you put the dough into the mixing bowl. Make sure that it's quite large enough to allow the bread to literally double in size. Now on top of the mixing bowl, I'm going to put a lightly oiled cling film or a plastic bag, whichever one you want to use. You need to make sure that the whole of the mixing bowl is covered, because that also allows the warmth to build up inside that mixing bowl, giving that dough a chance to double in size. Now I'm going to put the mixing bowl on top of my hob, and if you remember, I put the oven on so it allows the air to go to the mixing bowl. If you've got a nice warm place, a closet that's warm where the boiler is, you can put it in there and you let it sit. Now don't touch it, don't be tempted to move it or touch it or even take the cling film off for at least 60 to 70 minutes, at which point we're going to come in and check it, and the dough should have doubled in size by then. The dough has doubled in size. It's took about 70 to 80 minutes. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to knock it back, which is re-kneading again, but this time when we knock it back, we're going to add the ingredients that we want into it. Now when you take this dough out of the mixing bowl, you can feel the air that's just gone in there. And it is lovely and squidgy. Slightly sticky, so you're going to need a little bit of more flour on the surface of your board, not a lot, and you start kneading. Now this time you're only kneading for about 5 minutes, something like that, and as you knead you can feel how light, and it's almost like marshmallows. It has the texture of marshmallows, and you start kneading. And again, you do this for 5 minutes. Now I've been kneading this dough for about 5 minutes. Now we come to the fun bit, which is where we turn it into bread and do the second proof. Now roughly chop that dough into 2 halves. Now with one of those 2 halves, once again, I want to put approximately a teaspoon of fennel. Now fennel is a lovely aniseed spice and it flavours the flatbread absolutely perfectly. It's slightly sweet and it gives that lovely rich, almost Asian Mediterranean flavour to it. And what I'm doing is I'm kneading that fennel into the dough. That teaspoon of fennel is going into that dough. You don't want too much, you just want a little subtle hint of it. Now that I've kneaded it in, I'm going to separate that half of the dough with the fennel in, again, into 2 halves. And what I'm going to now do is I'm going to roll it out. Now I'm going to roll it out into a rough sort of circle, almost an oval shape. It's up to you. You don't have to be exact. It doesn't have to be an exact oval or an exact circle. The great thing with bread and making it at home, it's rustic. It's what artisan. And how it looks doesn't really matter, because trust me, the flavours in this is so punchy that it will override the look of it. Now you want to roll it out until it's approximately 2 millimetres in thick. It's quite a large circle or oval that you're doing. Almost like pizza. And for those of you who like pizza, you can use this dough as your base for pizza dough. Now I'm going to put this onto a tray, and then with the other half, well, the other quarter with the fennel in it, I'm going to roll that out to approximately the same shape. Now, I've rolled out that last quarter into roughly the same size as the other. Now here comes a great bit. You put your stuffing in. Now, I'm going to sprinkle cheese over it. Now you don't want it all the way to the edge, close to, but not all the way. Don't want too much cheese either, just a sprinkle, because it's a flatbread. It's not a stuffed pizza. So there's the cheese, and now I'm going to put the mozzarella, which will give you that lovely stringy texture that you get with it. Now from here, it's up to you what you put. I love putting pepperoni on it. And for those of you who are thinking, oh, Kim's a vegetarian, why is she putting pepperoni? This, guys, is vegetarian pepperoni, which you can get from some supermarkets. If you can't find it, you can use the vegetarian ham, which is just as nice. Now I've just kind of put the pepperoni all the way around. Now on top of this, because I love olives, so a sprinkle of olives just to give that little tang to the mixture. Now for those of you with sight, it looks like a pizza. It looks as if you're making a pizza, which is basically what you're doing. And I sprinkle some of those onions on top. And because I'm Indian and we like heat, I'm putting green chilies in. Now, I put 2 green chilies on here, which goes quite a long way. And again, if you want to put green chilies but don't like too much heat, put less. Now there we go. Now onto this, I'm going to put the other quarter of the fennel that we'd rolled out earlier. And then I'm just going to pat the edges so that they sort of stick together. Just very lightly pat the edges. Now very, very gently, just roll it. You want a very soft touch to this. And all you're going to do is spread the cheese a little bit more into the sides. And there you go. There is your stuffed flatbread. With that remaining dough, what am I going to do with it? Well, what you could do with it is roll it up into a bowl, put it onto a baking tray and let it rise, and you've got fresh bread. Or you could do some artisan bread, and you can put anything into this. I've put walnuts, onions. Onion bread's quite nice, and I do like a walnut bread, but my favourite of all is olive bread. Now with the mixed herbs, I'm going to put approximately, again, a teaspoon worth, and I've got a handful of olives, black olives, pitted, which I have sliced, and I'm going to put into the centre of the dough, and I'm going to knead it in. Now I like olive bread. Oh, it is utterly delicious, freshly out of the oven with butter just melting off it. Or my favourite is toasted olive bread. You haven't lived until you've had toasted olive bread, and this particular olive bread is really, really nice, especially with that little hint of mixed herbs, and again with lashings of butter on top as it comes out of the toaster. Now just knead in those olives, and whilst you're kneading in, what you're actually doing is you're getting some of the oil from the olives out, and it is flavouring that dough. So the kneading bit in here is really important. Right, I have now kneaded it for a couple of minutes. All the olives are really mixed into that. Now, again, you could shape it into a ball, a big round circle, or you could even do a plait with it. Be creative, it's your bread, do whatever you want with it. Or, because I like it toasted, I always put it into a greased loaf tin. Now the loaf tin is approximately 20 centimetres long, and you put your dough in the middle and just slightly pat it down. Now you're going to have a huge gap at the sides. Don't worry, because remember, we're previewing this dough again, so it is going to fill the space and it is going to double up. Now I've placed the dough on top of the hob just in case anyone's wondering. The hob never goes on, and what I'm going to sort of say is don't be tempted to touch the dough, don't be tempted to move the dough for 30 minutes, because the moment you start doing that, you're knocking some of the air out. So just leave it as it is and let it rise for 30 minutes. 30 minutes have gone and my flatbread and the olive bread have risen. Now the olive bread will need another sort of 5 to 10 minutes more, so I'm going to leave that, but the flatbread is now going to go into a hot oven, approximately 200 to 220 degrees, and it'll go for literally 10 minutes. I pull the flatbread out of the oven and I put the olive bread in. Now the olive bread will go in for approximately 10 to 12 minutes. Now the flatbread, for any of you who have got colour, is this lovely rich golden brown, and I'm going to do the bit that all of you hate me doing. I'm going to try some. So I'm going to just cut straight across the centre of this. And for those of you who can see, what you've got inside is that layer of cheese, olives, pepperoni and chilies. Now I'm going to try a little bit. This is great for picnics, it's great to eat when hot, and I always have it for lunch and save some for lunch. Fabulous. You can taste that subtle hint of fennel through it. You get the cheese, you get the pepperoni, and trust me guys, everyone that has had some of this flatbread of mine loves it. It is a definite winner, very easy to make, and it's worth doing. I have just pulled the olive bread out of the oven, and it's, for those with colour, it's a rich golden brown. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to check to see if it's cooked. Because it's bigger than the flatbread, it does take a little bit longer to cook. Now the sound you're looking for is a little bit of a hollow sound. Can you hear? Now that means it's done. So what I'm going to do is cut into it. A lovely slice right from the ends of it. Hot, so I'm going to use a clean tea towel just to hold it in place. And there you go. Olive bread. Now obviously I'm going to try it, gotta try it. Who can resist fresh bread with that smell of fresh bread cooking in the kitchen, just and not try it straight away? Absolutely perfect. The oil from the olive has spread throughout the bread, so even the bits of bread that doesn't have the olives, you can taste the hint of it with the mixed herbs. Again, delicious and well worth trying. Now you have a recipe for a great dish, but when you're in the kitchen there are certain safety guides and rules that you should adhere to, and which keeps you safe. Now one of the things that I do before I start cooking is I make sure that I've got shoes on that are sturdy with good grips. I make sure that there's nothing on the floor that I can trip over, and there are no spillages or liquid or condensation on the floor that makes it a bit of a hazard. Now, before cooking, the first thing that you do, as we all know, is wash our hands thoroughly. And especially when you're dealing with raw meat at every stage, wash your hands thoroughly. It stops cross-contamination. It keeps you and your family safe. When you're using the oven and the hob, know your oven and hob really well. Now, I use tactile markings so that I know exactly what temperature to put the oven on and what setting, so that I've not put the grill on when I should be putting the oven on. Now, with the hob, whenever you're sort of putting anything on the hob, make sure the handle is not sticking out. Now, I like to keep the handle at approximately 10 to 12. And the reason for that is it's not near enough to the unit for you to accidentally knock it off. It is not over another hob which may be on, so the handle's getting hot. So this is the safest position. Now, if you're boiling anything, be very, very careful. Don't fill the pan up too much. And if possible, use the boiler alert, which tells you when that liquid is bubbling away and it's hot, and it keeps you safe. If you're not comfortable with the hob and the oven, use the microwave whenever you can. It's a lot safer. And every time you are taking things out of the oven or from the microwave, because remember, plates and dishes get extremely hot in the microwave, use oven gloves. Now, I like to use thermal oven gloves. They're a lot safer. Don't be tempted to use tea towels or anything else. And they literally go to extreme temperatures, so you're very safe with them. Whenever you cut any food in the kitchen, use safe cutting methods. Keep the blade away from your fingers, so set it a couple of millimeters away from your fingers, and that way you're safe all the time. Now, if you're not confident with a knife, you can use appliances like food processors. Make sure you know how they work properly, and keep safe. And if you're still not confident, ask somebody else to do it. It is better to be safe than have an injury. If you have any cuts or you cut yourself whilst you're in the kitchen, put a plaster on it. And if you have a burn, run it under cold water. And if it's bad, you seek medical advice straight away. Whenever you cook meat, always ensure that the meat is thoroughly cooked, because you know, raw meat will give you food poisoning. Now, the best optimum temperature to cook meat is between 66 degrees and 73 degrees. Use a food thermometer if you're not too sure. They do have talking food thermometers, which you can get quite easily. And you store the meat as soon as you can. As soon as it's cooled down, store it straight away in the fridge and read the advice on storage on the labels.